a request came in that I talk about the cyber battle in the Doctor Falls. The easy part of this request is that I actually have a bunch of the original dailies and raw footage. So I've got things to show you that you probably haven't seen before. And some of that is in the official BBC behind the scenes segment, which particularly has material that I don't have, which is the cybers on the mini trampoline. So it's definitely worth going back and looking at that. The hard part is that I don't have a lot to say about it from a filmmaking standpoint, but then no doubt I'll talk a lot anyway. It was actually pretty straightforward, but maybe we can have some fun with it anyway. The script is very simple. The Doctor is striding through the trees, quote, firing his screwdriver, as cybers of all kinds advance, yelling like a madman. So that doesn't give you a huge amount to go on, or the openness of the description gives you a ton to go on.
Tell us! Still doing your ice tools!
Biggest credit for the sequence goes to Crispin, the stunt coordinator, and Danny, special effects, who were really responsible for the details. They designed and rehearsed the sequences while I was shooting the death of the Masters. The biggest limitations were the number of cybers available, which was limited by the number of suits we could find. Fortunately, the script called for all types of cybers, so we could go into the archives and the Doctor Who experience and collect everything, and I really loved that part. It feels like history and folklore and just feels significant. The multi-generations, putting them all together, it just had weight, and I always felt very privileged being allowed to work with the old props and the new props and the old incarnations and the new incarnations. Once we'd put together all the suits, we also had to afford the number of stunt players that went in them, but it all worked out. And also I'd learned on Nightmare on Silver that masses and masses of cybers was not scarier than a single one well used. Back on track. My instructions to Crispin were that I wanted the Doctor to feel heroic. I wanted Peter to feel in control and have room to act the lines. I was specific about the moment when he senses a Cyberman and shoots him without looking at him. It felt important that he knew exactly where his enemies were, in just that he was just intuitive at that moment.
Planet 14!
And the most important, I wanted the main action to be one shot. I didn't want to construct lots and lots of little action cuts. I felt like if I kept it all together, the heroism would feel much stronger. I knew we'd have cutaways to get the best cyber action, but I wanted Peter's performance to feel like one continuous piece, with the Doctor the absolute centerpiece. So in order to shoot it, first Peter was led by his stunt double through the maze of explosions and action. Here's the first rehearsal we filmed. Unfortunately, there isn't any sound because we shot slow-mo, and this is the raw footage. Once Peter had the rhythm and knew where the explosions were and what was deemed safe, he went right into shooting it. As with all action scenes, we ran more than one camera. We had the main camera backing up with Peter and a second handheld camera on the side, and then we planted a GoPro to try and get some details of the explosions. As you can see in take one, it didn't go as planned. The sound team was caught out trying to negotiate explosions in more than one camera. Here's a second, less effective angle. The camera had to stay out of the way of the main camera. Note how we had to reset explosions between each take. Also, notice how we reused the stuntman in the foreground, so he had to take that tumble and then rush and get up and be ready for the second explosion. Also, take a look at how little of this angle is actually useful. By the later takes, we stayed closer to Peter, and although we had a little bit less scope, it was more dynamic. Of course, we also had to balance things like when there ended up being too much smoke or debris in the air. Then Peter Bennett went off and shot some second unit of these cybers flying through the air, and that's the footage basically done on mini trams. And here's some of the examples of it, but it's worth going, as I said earlier, it's worth going back and looking at the BBC footage as well. On one level, I would have been happy to keep it all without any edits. On the other hand, the flying cybers are great, so why let technique get in the way of audience enjoyment? There was a comment from a viewer about this, about style over substance. The single shot has to be really great and also have a reason to fight for it, to stay as one shot. The vast majority of viewers are watching the story and don't need to think about the filmmaking at a point like this. Here you can see the whole shot and judge for yourself whether you agree with the decision to cut it up.
Talos! Seal you with your ice tools! Olga! Canary Wharf! Planet 14! Every single time! You lose, even on the moon.
And I'm just going to say one more thing. Peter absolutely loved doing this sequence. Just saying.